Hello, it's me, Jay, your DM. I use he, him.
Hi, I'm your heir. I use he and him.
Hi, I am your leap, and I use he and him.
I'm your Jerika, I guess. I use she, her.
I'm nobody's Mazz. I use they, them.
Nice.
I'm here because I had nothing better to do.
And we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Love you too.
Oh, you're recording. I'll just join you.
I'm also here because my gaming plans fell through, so really it's just a tag-along day.
It's just the philosophy of this podcast. What else are we doing? Nothing. Let's pod.
Listeners,
Yeah, exactly.
I am sorry at the apathy that we have shown so far for you listening to us. This is Insight Check, when we answer your cues from our collective A's, and we delve into the dungeon of your bad decision and retrieve the treasure of wisdom.
And enthusiasm. Wisdom and enthusiasm.
I did the last thing first and the first thing last. I'm so very sorry.
Welcome, one and all, to an episode where we're
Our
definitely...
collective second choice.
Anyone was wondering, these people cheer one up when they're annoyed and angry about bureaucracy.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear it.
Woot.
Bureaucracy can get out, because today the only rules that matter are incremented in cubic meters of 5 feet. Today the only units that measure are increments of 5 feet. There we go.
Nice.
I'll get it on the second take. That's what they call me, old second take J.
It's a good nickname, man.
Old Metric J.
Yep, old imperial metric unification.
You should talk to the guys that tried to fix my windows because they need some help on that.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely America's where you want to turn to for help on that. So we're here today to get down, get dirty, get deep in these dungeons for a dungeon crawl.
I got a crawl if we require a crawl. I am already belly deep on the floor, muck to my shoulders, burrowing into my face, but I crawl about.
Don't always have to be dirty.
Look, I was just taking
Also,
Jay's
we're
lead.
just at the entrance. This is a lot of commitment this early on.
When I
This
start
is an
with
intense
a
dungeon.
you know you're gonna get dirty anyways. You might as well start, right? Like start right at the beginning, get it all out of the way. Everything else is just like, well, I'm already covered to my eyeballs. You can't
it's
get
like
me
if
anymore.
somebody prophesies that you're going to lose your hand, you just cut it off right away so it can't happen at an inopportune moment later.
Jay, don't do that.
I just throw myself on my sword.
Can I suggest prestidigitation? The spell
yeah.
that makes you clean.
Yeah,
That's true.
But I got that walnut vibe.
Furnish your dungeon with some gelatinous cubes to clean the passageways as well.
There you go.
Okay,
Classique.
But Leap, what is your dungeon crawl?
that's okay. Well, so my dungeon crawl this week actually has to do with the Humblewood setting. Anyone who has listened to me speak for more than a minute and a half knows how much I love D&D and animals, and being animals in D&D form. And our good friend Cal has kickbacked that starter of the Humblewood campaign, and he decided that he would be running his very first DM session in that place. And so he invited me and Dova and Faizan, who are all good friends of ours, to play in that game. And we've played one session so far, but it is just like a really sweet and wonderful place. What I thought was going to be small animals, they're like 5 foot tall versions of these animals. And there are also other animals in that space. So it was like Cal had this really great NPC who is a crow person. Their name is a Corvin in the game. And she had a crow as a pet, which was just like dope. It was really, really cool. Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm playing a raccoon creature known then as a Malpac. And I am like this very small, like traveling grave digger, cleric of the grave.
I thought Humblewood was just birds.
No, so they have like there are two different kind of folk. There are like bird folk, which are birds. And all of them are wonderful. Like they've chosen some prime birds, top tier bird choices. And then they've also have the humble folk, which are the mammalian species. So in those forms, you can be like, I don't know all of their names yet, but you can be a deer person, a raccoon person, a hedgehog person, like a very small jumpy mouse person. You can be a fox as well. And which is they like a lot of races or species in D&D, they have like subclasses of if you want to be this one or this one.
Sure.
And they also say like straight up there that you can skin, not like physically skin the creature. That's terrible.
Yeah. Okay.
But like, for example, Faizan is the raccoon class, but he's playing it as a beaver. And so he's bringing like his own little flavor to it, which is like really, really cool. And they all have like their own racial features. And yeah, if you have a chance to check it out, I highly recommend it. It's pretty cool.
I have a slightly related which I'm going to talk about. Someone else might have talked about it before, but I'm going to talk about it now. This week I finally watched Zibashu's Shillelagh video that he released recently. And it was sponsored by Humblewood, which is why it's related.
Yes.
But I am, for Jay's game on Saturday, I am using Shillelagh for my melee stuff.
Which was really surprising because you're not a druid in that one.
No,
What?
I'm not.
I was just about to ask what kind of druid Jerika is being.
I'm the sorcerer kind of druid.
I'm the
Sorcerer, you may ask. Only clerics and druids can get Shillelagh, as you might know if you watch the Zibashu video. Well, I did one thing that he also suggests in the video, which is use Magic Initiate to get it. So that's what I did for my feat, and I'm not sad that I did it.
I have a question.
I did it. Yeah.
I got a question because I haven't watched the Zibashu thing, and it would be rude for me to do that immediately.
Yes, please wait until the podcast is over. The audio would be very difficult, very challenging for me.
It would be a tough J afternoon trying to cut out the pod.
Challenges are always good.
Yeah.
Are they always good?
It's how we learn and grow.
Maybe Jay is looking for a challenge.
Proceed with thine question, Jan Leap.
Thank you. So does that mean that wisdom is like a really high stat of your character? Because it was my understanding that when you have Shillelagh, wisdom becomes the modifier that you use, or is it just your spellcasting modifier?
Your spellcasting modifier.
Oh, wow. See, that's dope.
It is.
So they were bashing some heads last session in spite of their sorceress nature.
Well, the club didn't really work so well, if I remember correctly. Other things worked better, which we may or may not be getting into. But I have to say, we had a funny moment where I cast Melf's Minute Meteors, and Jay said, "Oh, Melf's Minute Meteors?" And I was like, the world makes sense now. Everything, I understand it.
To be fair, I bet they do last for a minute, though.
They don't.
Really?
Yeah, Melf's Minute Meteors, where you get a little halo of special meteors and you can throw them down for 2D something damage. It's actually really good.
Flaming sphere. Boo, 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 boo. My Shillelagh.
Air.
Yeah, it's like 4d6 for a bonus action, right? At like 5th
And good
level.
range, too.
Yeah.
And it lasts up to 6 rounds, but it can be 3 rounds.
Yeah,
is
it's a nice
cool.
one. I just wanted to talk about some excellent gaming experiences I've had for my dungeon crawl. First and foremost, playing some small Strahd with our friend, the Drunk Phytologist, DP.
Nice.
We had a session where my Beetleborn boy, we're going through the small folk version of Death House, which is the intro adventure for Curse of Strahd. And so the only way to get down to the basement we could find was this dumbwaiter I wouldn't fit in. So I essentially asked the 2 children who are the only beings in the house to grease me up with butter so I'd fit.
I have a butter-related story too.
I love butter-related stories. Please go.
New theme.
So I had a very tactical combat over the weekend. We were on a beach and we had been tasked with fighting lobster people in order to prove ourselves worthy of being allies with the crab people.
I think I've identified where butter comes into this story.
Oh my goodness.
So in that game, I'm playing a rogue with an arcane trickster rogue. And so we had one lobster person come from the front out of the cave, and we had one lobster person come out of the ocean, and we had one lobster person come from the right side.
This is so
and then
good.
we were surrounded. But I cast grease on the second lobster person, and I did identify the grease specifically as butter.
Nice.
Jerika, I just have to ask. You had lobster people surrounding you. Would you call that a pincer maneuver?
Oh,
I mean-
no.
I mean, if you have 3 pincers, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
dropped
hi, I have a dungeon crawl as well.
Oh,
and
I
mine
wasn't
is... Oh, damn.
Just one more quick one. I got to play Monster of the Week, which was keepered, I guess would be the term, by a friend of Laura, and it was super fun, and I got to be a horny werewolf. Okay, all done.
I mean, you didn't have to rush through it. You're fine.
There's honestly not all that much more to say. It was really a lot of fun, and Monster of the Week is fun.
Nice.
I'm glad. It seems like a really nice session style, especially, like, the one thing I didn't necessarily care for in the show version that the McElroys did was that the parts of it were so spread out, where you got the mission, and then you started investigating, and then you started to solve, and it was like, sort of like a formula, right? Because these shows do have formulas.
Yeah, it's based on your formulaic Monster of the Week kind of show, yeah.
Right, but like if you put it all in one session or 2 sessions maybe, like I can imagine how that could be really fun, like hitting those strides and kind of knowing what the next beat is and being able to play off that in your role play as well. Sort of predicting where the story might go based on your knowledge of the genre.
And Alora definitely led in with that, like had a mystery ready to go in this small town, and yeah, by the end we had definitely done that kind of Monster of the Week. I basically talked a ghost out of killing townsfolk. It was great.
That's awesome.
Because I'm a super charming werewolf. Anyway.
And my dungeon crawl this week is going to be loosely related to the topic of today's episode, which is assets that you can use for tactical combat, making it easy to run tactical combat in your games. I think I've already mentioned it once before, but if I haven't, or if you have forgotten it, or if you're new, there's a great website called Dungeon, Dungen, which randomly generates a dungeon map. And so you can use it on a small, medium, large, or extra large dungeon to create a random layout of rooms and corridors really quickly, and it's formatted for exporting to Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or for printing out as well. So that's really awesome. I really like the 2-minute tabletop token editor, which is a special token editor that's got black and white tokens of different monsters and characters, and you can color edit each token individually. So you can get a very customized personal token very, very quickly that you can export out or print off for a paper miniature on your table or for your online games. And then the last is a tool made by Sebastian Bernard, which is RPG Map 2, which is a website which we will link on our Twitter. It's on deepnight.net under Tools, RPG Map. It is a really cool map making tool that allows you to make very simplistic maps on the fly with light sources and walls, and the behavior of the light actually adheres to walls and windows, so you can see light spills out of windows and spills out of doorways. So it's very nice in that facet. And it's very, very light, so it's not going to be great for decorations or things like that. But where it lacks in maybe decor, it makes up for in ease of use, because you can crank out a map on RPG Map 2 in about 5 minutes, and that's not an exaggeration. Like, you can make a pretty decent structural map that quickly, and it's got settings for blueprint style layouts, it's got settings for caves, and it's got settings for architectural layouts, so you can get a nice variety of uses. Very, very cool. And those are the tools that I'm talking about with introducing the topic of tactical play.
Let's talk about strats, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the elements of the action economy. Let's talk about strats.
So I have to say personally that I do much better in a combat where I have to think strategically when I can see things and know exactly where things are. And, take the lobster fight. So we were using a sort of a plasticized paper map grid, and the DM drew a very the suggestion, the kiss of a just
of
the
a
kiss
rose?
of a shoreline. Just a squiggle.
Oh, I've been there. When I used to run in-person games, I had one of those roll-out dry erase maps that we would do marker all over to try and approximate the room that they were in.
I can't tell you how many of those I still own.
I love them because it gives me some idea of what's in the DM's head. Sometimes it's not super clear.
Yeah.
But at least with that, you have some idea of spatial relationships. And so, when the lobsters put the pincer on us, it was easy to stymie one of them so that they could, debuff them so that we could focus on some of the other ones and all that kind of stuff. I thought it was much easier than splitting my mind into 4 parts and keeping everything clear in my head as we were playing.
Tactical combat in Theater of the Mind is like dancing about architecture. I agree, yeah. If you're going to go the tactical combat route, I really think a map is a must-have.
And then I think it can spark questions about cover and I don't know, other things you could do. Is this here? Is that here? Can I use this? All that kind of stuff.
I think there's actually an advantage to having those just dry erase marker sketched maps, because if you have something that's super detailed, I find a lot of times players don't try to start injecting things into the world, if there were a crate there would be a picture, right? Whereas if you just have a simple grid with walls and whatnot spelled out, people can start being well, there's probably a barrel over there in that corner, right? Okay, I want to kick that over at them and try to trip them up or something like that.
Yeah, there can be a certain advantage towards abstraction where you can imagine into the environment items. There's actually a really cool element in Ryutama which has tactical combat to an extent. But in Ryutama, at the beginning of a combat, you go around the table and everybody decides what random objects are on that battlefield. Oh, cool. So everybody will get a chance to say, oh yeah, there's a market stall nearby and they have a crate full of apples. And then the next person will say, oh, there's actually a little buggy in the middle of the road and the person who is driving the buggy has run away to cover.
There's 2 men carrying a large piece of glass.
Yeah, exactly. And because everybody gets to put those things in, then in combat, if you use one of those things as part of your attack, you get a bonus.
Oh, cool. That's neat.
So there's a mechanical incentive as well for incorporating these sort of flavor bits into your game.
Beside the glass lifters, there's a man playing yakety sax on the saxophone. That's super interesting.
Why not Careless Whisper, Air?
I mean, has anyone ever romantically fallen through a window? Possibly. I'm sure it's happened at least once.
motion.
Ryutama is a game that I really think that we should all play sometime because I think there's a lot we could all learn about RPG design and narrative RPG design that I don't think other games have really used or even touched on as well as Ryutama does. When you come to a town in Ryutama, you have a blank sheet and you ask the players around the table going around in order questions about that town.
Oh, we should make a plot out of that.
Sheet.
For sure.
Yeah.
I've looked at it.
And then you have a custom town that everybody made together.
This is just lazy DMing.
So, for example, it'll be like, what is this town known for? What is this town's main export? You know, that kind of stuff.
So I have a question, or I have a thing that I've been thinking about during this conversation. As a DM, I know that I use more theater of the mind than physical maps because of ease of access and how I've been used to playing games.
Sure.
But how would you guys think about including strategy into like a theater of the mind space? Like I was just while you guys were talking, Jay, I was imagining just stopping before entering a room, describing a room to the players, and then even just posing the question like, what else do you want to know about the room, right? Or like, what would you think?
Here's one thing I can give you right off the bat. This is stolen directly from a great hack of old school tabletops called the Black Hack. And the Black Hack is basically a 10-page version of D&D that I think is probably one of the best light D&D clones there is. I would actually place it right up there with Dungeon World, and I think that you guys should try it out sometime. It's a very simple, cheap online RPG, and it's really fun. But they have 3 ranges, near, far, and very far.
Oh, I thought it was going to be wherever you are.
Yeah. So it's near, far, and very far. And so basically you can move one of those per movement. So
I like that.
If I were playing in D&D in Theater of the Mind, rather than having people trying to measure feet in their heads, you could just say, okay, you enter into a room. Very far from you, there are 3 goblins. And then people can move to get to far, and then double move to get to near, right? Mm-hmm. And so if they dash, they've moved 2 of those distance units closer. And then you might let the monk use 2 of those distance units at the same time, right? Just for the sake of letting them still have their cool stuff.
Yeah.
But using that, instead of measuring distance, you just got to keep in relation to your head, am I near, far, or very far from this enemy? And that abstraction will help you a lot with reducing sort of the mental strain. Because I feel like the problem with Theater of the Mind is when you get into measuring feet over multiple rounds.
Oh,
like
totally.
that one session we had in, I think it was the F list, where we were moving at like 300 feet around on horseback. And we were trying to calculate distances in our head, doing some abstract math. And it would have been much better to just sort of taken it a step away from the actual math of who can move how far. I think that just saying like, okay, you're far away. What do you do to get near to this person is more interesting and probably works better than trying to ask a lot of people to do a bunch of math on the fly, which might be their jam, but
I believe
might
you
not.
were DMing from the backseat of a car that night. And
Yes, so I didn't have any
our
maps or
grandiose
anything.
plan was I summoned a phantom steed. And I think we were playing with, who were we playing with? We were playing with Becca.
We had a guest player in.
Yeah. And she hasted the steed. So we had a lot of...
It created some very, very interesting interactions that I had to mitigate from the back of a car.
Oh my goodness.
So we'd run up, fireball, and then run away because we could move like 200 feet around or something ridiculous.
Right. So I might say that like a fireball can hit something that's very far. And then like that a 60-foot spell could hit something that's far, and then anything within like a range of 30 feet or less is gonna hit something that's near. And just call it a day. I think that if you abstract it to just those 3 distances, it's gonna make it easier on everybody, and it'll be easier on you as the DM. Because what I can actually do if I run in the Black Hack is I can just draw 3 concentric circles. And I can just put everybody around those circles with like little pieces of paper or coins that represent them, and just put them at the 3 different ranges from each other, right? And then as you move in, I just slide you in 1 circle. And so that becomes the map, is just 3 concentric rings. Very, very simple.
I like that idea. I like that idea a lot because I know that I have very little care of physical distance when it comes to theater of the mind, right? Like you just want people to have an understanding of like, can they do the thing or not? Or do they need to move to do the thing?
Right.
What I was thinking strategy wise is like trying to drop or show the hints of how manipulative, how you can manipulate the space, right? Like just either by talking about the tables all the time or the chairs, or in your description showing someone in the combat like knocking a full table over and getting behind it, right? Just like just showing that even though that space is not like as like you can't point to the map and be like, this is the table I want to get behind, I still like the idea of giving the players access to being able to fuck with the space.
Sure.
You know?
I think probably the easiest way to get that to happen if it's not happening is if you, as the DM, do it yourself with the monsters.
Yeah, totally.
If the players see the monsters jumping behind cover, behind tables, they're also going to start thinking about, oh, shoot, cover is a thing, and I should use it.
Actually.
And that can be a nice little reminder as well.
For sure. No, definitely. That actually reminds me of, I was playing a small folk one shot and they were in the basement of a jam, distribution center. And there was just some real bad, Jay, it was good. I don't want to get into it too much, but I wanted to show to them that the jam could do something. And so I like dropped a bunch of hints throughout it, and then someone rolled poorly and then showed them the reaction of what would happen if one interacted with the jam in such a way, which led to our good friend Sam Hotep just like really annihilating the whole place.
Fail forward.
Which was fantastic. Yeah, no, it was one of my favorite ends to a game recently. But yeah, I think that if you have, as a DM, if you have a mechanism that you have kind of built into the space that you don't see being used, Jay, I think you hit it on the head, that you need to really kind of, you show them that it's available to be played with.
One of the things that I like about Theater of the Mind in terms of strategy is there's certain features that classes get that I think actually play better or see more play in Theater of the Mind. Like when you're playing on a grid, the fighters have a fighting style where they can, like, if they have a shield, they can interpose it between them and someone else near them that's getting attacked. And if you're on a grid, it's like, well, you're not technically, if you were one square over, you could use it. Whereas I think a lot of DMs want their players to use all the cool stuff they have. So if you're playing Theater of the Mind, it's like, well, no, remember on my last turn when I ran beside him is nebulous enough that it doesn't matter which square I'm adjacent to him or her or them, that player, their character. It is just that I've given enough narrative defense of, well, I remember how I went to that person to help them. Can't I do this? I think DMs are a lot more lenient in that regard to let you use that cool thing that you can do when you're not kind of down in the weeds of exactly what square you're in.
I think that it can definitely be easier to get some of your abilities off when you're in Theater of the Mind because there's some leeway there to play around with that. But I think that it's more rewarding in real tactical play when you pull off your really great combos, because nothing was given to you for free, right? You earned everything that you did. You didn't like luck into or have a DM concede that you were in a certain place. You put yourself in the place to succeed by your wit and guile, and you outsmarted the monsters and you outthought them. Do you guys mind if I spoil something from the latest Critical Role, or would that be bad form?
I think with a warning for people to be able to jump, I think that's
right,
fair.
but you here in the room with me right now.
Oh, I'm good.
I'm good.
I am never
okay,
going to
everybody,
catch up.
A small
I've
spoiler
given
for
up trying.
Critical Role episode, most recent one as of recording. There was a scene in the last episode where Jester was situated in a room with a hag, and the hag was demanding, in exchange for removing a curse from one of their friends, the hag was demanding a sacrifice. And each person had come in and talked about a thing that they might sacrifice. And of course, because the people who are on Critical Role are all actors, they were really enjoying this chance to like maim or mess up their characters or introduce a wrinkle into the plot. And so that dramatically was more interesting to them than a combat with the hag. So they were all really enjoying the scene. And Jester goes in, and Jester gives the hag a muffin, on which Jester has placed the dust of deliciousness, which is a special dust that grants disadvantage on wisdom saves after you consume it. And then Jester does modify memory to modify the hag's memories that she agreed to remove the curse.
Oh boy.
And that's it. The hag does it. The hag removes the curse and they get to leave. Although there's like implications that the hag is very confused about why she agreed to do this and that she might, greater restoration herself later. And
Was her payment the muffin?
her payment was a enjoyable conversation with the person for the first time in a long time, which is why the hag was very confused why she agreed to that.
I mean, we all love that.
But yeah, it was like a really great moment of strategy and cunning and guile, and it was a high-risk moment because they cast a spell on a very powerful NPC that could have turned that whole thing into a massive combat if they had failed that spell save. It was a huge moment. And I think that the reason Laura Bailey is thinking like that is because Matt has never given them an inch in any combat, and it forces them to really think about how to best use their abilities at every given moment. And I think that like tactical combat can really inspire like players to use all of their abilities and like really dig deep into their magic item list and stuff like that to find that one thing that can totally change a moment.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't really get tactical with stuff every once in a while, like, I feel like you can kind of lose that sense of, like, really knowing your character super well and knowing everything they can do.
I remember there was also the time when we needed to do fire damage, and I was just a big dumb fighter and didn't check my equipment list to see I had 3 unused uses of a fire breath potion. I am not that player.
Like, you had an answer to the problem, even though you were just a fighter. Yeah. Like, and that's what, like, knowing your character can really get you into those really cool moments where it's like, oh my god, I have the tools. Like, I mean, probably the combat I did with Jerika this weekend, the 3 most critical players were Jerika, the bard, and the fighter. Because they were using abilities just like, it was like a dance. Just keying off of each other's abilities and making these things happen that just completely shut down monsters that could have one-shot any of them.
I really enjoy that sort of synergy that you get when players either realize or plan ahead that certain tactics can work together to win. It's like that thing with suggestion that we did with F-List.
Yeah. Like, they did suggestion on an aboleth that it would allow them to cast a spell
water
on it.
walk as well.
Yeah.
And it cast water walk on it, thinking that it was getting some other healing spell or some other buff spell, and it suddenly was out of the water, and it had a 10-foot movement speed. And suddenly it was completely weakened and made ineffectual.
One of the most recent PCs I played in Jay's game was a Shiatsu cleric rogue who my entire plan was I made it.
Wait. An intense massage cleric.
Yes, they healed. They did cure wounds by literally just rubbing shoulders and just working out kinks, and that's how they healed people. Yeah, they got their training from a holy hot spring kind of spa. And he was very chill. He was a very cool kind of dude.
Love drugs.
Did he have a shark tooth necklace?
He should have. And
yeah.
Thank you. That's mentally inserted into all memories of him from here on out. He wasn't maybe the best character I ever dreamt up, but he was efficacious in what he did, which was healing really, really good. So I made a rogue cleric, life cleric. So the idea was be an Aarakocra. You can fly super fast, get in, heal everybody with Beacon of Hope up so they get the maximum healing, then fly away and hide. I figured that would be really good. And the monster Jay had for us shot laser beams that destroyed the terrain. So I hid behind a rock and then voip. I got zapped.
Yeah.
Shit. I was like, well, the healing
It was
part
a
worked.
phoenix with a laser beam just shooting through the
That
ground.
sounds like my favorite Queen song.
Flash.
I liked the unplanned synergy that happened this weekend as well. The one where they used dissonant whispers and it worked and the enemy ran its full movement speed away. So I was thinking, well, that's clever because now everybody can just move back 10 feet. And because it moved its full movement, it can't possibly get back in melee. So they bought like one round where it's going to have to double move to get back in melee with everyone. But then Jerika, out of nowhere with this sorcerer, busts out Maximilian's Earthen Grasp, grabs that thing at 40 feet away, and it can't move back in melee. And because
I was lucky that it didn't make its saves, though, for sure.
well, I mean, it wasn't just luck. Your save DC is pretty good, and it didn't have a huge bonus, so it was a pretty good play all around. I think it only had like a +4 to that specific statistic, and your save DC is 14, so that gave it 50-50 odds.
Yeah, for sure.
And it took like 2 or 3 rounds for it to break free, which gave you plenty of time to handle the other enemy and finish it like almost down to like 18 health before the last one showed up. So it was a really amazing play where just like one of them pushed it away, the other one held it at that distance. Now they've eliminated one enemy, focus fire the other one, constantly hitting it with the new fighter ability that makes them afraid. One of the new fighter Battlemaster maneuvers.
Yeah. Is that
makes
new?
the enemy afraid. So it may be old,
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Didn't it have to do with dragon? Was it not a Dragonborn thing?
No, I think it was one of their Battlemaster things.
Oh, okay, all right.
But they used their superiority dice to give fear to this thing every round, so it was attacking at disadvantage. So almost every round it was disadvantaged, and then they fairy fired it, which was giving advantage against it. It was just like, honestly, it was one of the most cool combats I've ever run because everybody was doing everything they could to just shut down monsters that I was really scared about. Because like when I prepared the combat, I didn't select any combats that were deadly. I only did hard combats. I didn't hard or less, hard or medium, because I didn't want to kill anybody in like the first session. So it's hard or medium combats, because they've all got magic items as well. So they're a little stronger than maybe their level indicates. So it's like hard or medium combats. But the thing is when you have 5 players, it messes up CR a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the hard combats, the enemies, they weren't like multi-attacking. They were only single attacking. But their single attacks could either knock out or outright kill characters at 5th level. Like, these characters have between 20 and 30 hit points, and these enemies were hitting between 30 and 50 damage. And it was just like, whoa, these enemies are a lot more dangerous than I gave them credit for. Like, I think, honestly, enemies at the same CR that had multi-attack and did, like, 15 or 30 damage per hit would have been a lot less deadly, because there's always the chance that you miss an attack with 2 attacks.
Yeah.
So you don't deliver all that damage every round. But these single-hit enemies, if they hit, you were going down. So it was all about mitigating that risk. They were just casting fear. They were casting fairy fire to get advantage.
Jerika, can I ask you a question? Is this character that you're playing in Jay's game the one we talked about in regards to like being the best at making people fail deck saves?
Yes.
Because that's what I wanted to talk
Yeah.
about. Do any of you, I know Jerika does because we talked about this, and I know I certainly do, build a character with a strategy in mind? Like, I am always going to be the person who is controlling the baddies and making them stand there drooling, or I'm always going to be the one that's healing everybody, or do you go in with a specific stratagem?
Well, so far so good. I am like 5th level, and I have a feeling things are going to get harder and harder. And we've only fought monstrosity type things. So I assume if we find humanoids, it's going to get harder, or things that are dexterous or whatever. And my powers are going to get stretched out. I also have sleep in my spell list right now. And I have to say, that spell's a little problematic at higher levels. So
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if I get... And the thing with sleep is I was waiting, and I was like, it's got to get lower in hit points. It's got to get lower. And I was like, you know what? I could just cast this other spell, which will keep the enemy there. And that worked better. So
Sleep becomes
Maximilian's Earthen Grasp. Is it just a better sleep?
sleep becomes a very good coup de grace later on. It's the nice way to end the combat. You go sleep.
Yeah, exactly. So I have to say, when I first sort of started and was sort of working on character building in the very beginning when I started playing D&D, I was really into Druid, especially Circle of the Moon, because your tactic is very obvious. It is perhaps wild shape and attack, or it's cast a concentration spell and wild shape. Kind of thing. Like, those are sort of two tactics I used a lot.
Cook and eat bad guy. Yeah.
What I've found in the Druid that I've been playing is that I've kind of found the niche that I fit in the party, right? Like, and so I think some characters, I think some people build around damage, right? Like if you're a sorcerer or whatever, or like, or if you're a gunslinger, you're trying to just make as much damage as possible. And so for a lot of the casting classes, the strategy becomes like, well, I'm going to be the off healer and I'm also going to be doing control spells, or I would be picking wild shapes for either like for the ability that they had too, right? Like a really good one is like the really big snake that you can be, especially at a low level. We had a game where our rogue got a little bit too willy-nilly with the political figures that he decided to kill in a town. And all of a sudden,
that happens.
We had a body that needed to disappear really quickly. And fortunately, I could turn into a very big snake that could...
Just the giant constrictor snake?
Yeah, the giant constrictor snake.
Glomp.
So, all of a sudden, that problem was solved. And so,
tactic you relied on multiple times?
Unfortunately, I had to do it a couple times.
No.
Yeah.
This is some body horror-ish. What happens if you eat something as big?
I wouldn't think about it. I wouldn't think about
We played it. Let me play it in
Mazz is going back to
as
vor.
PG of a
Stop
way
me now.
as we did. No, I came back and it looked as if I had eaten like a full Thanksgiving dinner. And like just really
Just a cartoon belly poking out.
belly.
God.
I role played it that I then like the combat ended and the thing, like I was like, okay, Lievra sleeps for 4 days. You don't see heads or tails of
Everyone
him
knows
for
mares
4
are
days
just head to
straight.
tail, just full of tryptophan.
Exactly. And like, I don't know, like the druid has a lot of great spells that can do that thing, or they're like, this was right out of a C-Team page, but we were doing a bank heist and it was on a timer and we were only able to get down one of the places where we needed to, like, there were 2 latches that we needed to pull, but we needed to pull them simultaneously from 2 different parts of the bank that then met. And the only thing that like stopped you from getting to each of them at the same time was this giant cavern that the elevator came up and down on. And it was then like just this huge drop. But I remembered the spider form that I had, and then I was able to very quickly in the last like minute of the game, like jimmy my way around without any trouble, and then we were able to solve this puzzle, right? So, but I thought of those things when picking those animals. I wanted an animal that could do something, not just be extra health points.
Mazz, I know you've run plenty of different games for plenty of different groups. Have you ever had a group like surprise you with like a...
I'm just like, I had not a lot to say before the vor, and now I'm just like,
I'm sorry. I can't. It always comes back around. Like a snake eating its tail, which is odd.
Oh, God.
Oh my God.
Oh, no.
It's the Vorivorous
Voroboros.
tactical stuff is like, it's really good and important to have those sorts of combats that mix things up and make you think about stuff. Because, like, otherwise it's just the same old grind. You're killing stuff over and over again. It's that South Park where they're killing the pigs in WoW, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You just have the same fights over and over. You use the same spells.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so having something that makes the players think and shakes it up is interesting for a DM as well as for the players. I mean, something I quite like to do is I steal from like the 4E idea of minions. And so like my players are like, what are all these hundreds of things coming at us? But then they start hitting them and they go down really quickly. So that's a good thing to throw. Or you could just like use a swarm of creatures.
Your wizard just says, my time to shine.
Yeah.
Put a
Oh, I remember a time some players surprised me. A fight broke out and 2 of them went off and had mimosas.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
we had a situation like that. We had a situation like that in our game where one of the players' backstory is that they've recently gone through this sort of terrible tragedy where they lost their friends. And so they're, through the whole combat, they are just sort of staying back and using only their baseline attack options, like a crossbow, 2 attacks, turnover. And they are just sort of hanging back and just doing what they need to qualify as having helped without actually getting in melee, taking any damage, or using their spell slots because they're an artificer. And I think it's like really good, but I can tell that some of the other players are a little frustrated by it because obviously they're having a very tough time in a very difficult combat and they're risking their characters' lives. And this one character is not using their abilities to the fullest of their capacity. And that's a really interesting situation where tactics and roleplay are kind of at odds. Like the tactical thing would be for this player to jump in and use their spells and their abilities. But the roleplay choice that they're making is that they're not doing that. The consequences for that should, in a perfect world, be roleplay consequences where the other characters get mad at them. But in reality, the consequences might be that me, the DM, is like, hey, you can't do this. The other players are getting really annoyed and it's like stressing them out.
We were having a conversation online with a gentleman whose name escapes me right now, but talking about, narrative versus simulationist games, and D&D tends to get most simulationist in combat. And that's what I was saying. It's like, we want it to, though, because that's when you want to have a lot more verisimilitude, a lot more of an exacting rule set, because every time you go into a combat, what you're anteing is your character sheet.
Jay, I had something similar in one of my campaigns, actually.
Oh, really?
I had a cleric who was a pacifist. Didn't kill a single thing the whole campaign.
Oh, I actually love that as a character choice. I've done a pacifist care before. It's hard.
Well, it wasn't for this group because the rest of them loved murder. So. It was just a cleric that hung back and didn't kill anything.
I played my first pacifist character in one of the small folk games that Leap DM'd, and he was a bard. No offensive spells, couldn't do any damage, but I did not dissonant whispers, the laughing one, hideous laughter, on a character that was in a tree, and they fell and died, and I was like, well, I guess I'm out. I can't do it.
Yep. You know what? You didn't know that was going to fall and die.
What I did was, what I would do if I was playing a pacifist is I would make sure I was playing a grave cleric and had 30-foot stabilize. Spare the dying at 30 feet range. Because then, even if you accidentally kill somebody at range, you can spare the dying them really quickly.
That would actually be...
and keep them stabilized.
You could be every round the flatliner maneuver. Kill, live, kill, live.
Well, no, it's like with your 30 feet spare the dying, you can make sure that all the enemies that you ever face can pretty much always survive. So you don't have to be a killer.
Unless they're completely immolated.
Yeah, if you squish a goblin, then there's not much you can do about that. Unless you're willing to do true resurrection on a goblin.
Spare the puddle.
Unfortunately, at a certain level of dead, there's not much you can do. But there are some pretty good options for keeping folks alive in the current edition.
One thing that D&D teaches us.
I have spared the dying an enemy.
Ooh.
It's nice, right? It's like a really great
feeling for sure.
It's a great character choice, I think. Because I feel like when you treat the enemies like living beings, the game takes on a totally different texture. Because once you like acknowledge that the bandit you're fighting is a person, then the whole game takes on a totally different flavor that I kind of enjoy.
Did you say bad or bed? Because if
I said
it's
bandit.
if it's a bed, that's a mimic, not a person.
It's true.
It's very different.
Do mimics have feelings? Should we get into that? I don't know if we should get into
They
that.
have feelings.
They have sense organs in their mouth region.
They have feelings, and I love to hurt them.
That's fair. Jay, something that you said earlier, or something that you've done as a DM that I think would really also help with helping build strategy in your games is you really like doing a debrief at the end of a game. And I think as a DM, if you really want to highlight the cool things that people have done in a combat, right? Like if you're positively reinforcing the strategic
Give players
choices.
Inspiration.
Yeah,
Like,
for
use
sure.
that
You
mechanic.
gave out like 3 inspirations.
Yeah,
last game.
because I loved everything
didn't
y'all were
mind
doing.
it. Yeah.
So it was like, yeah, if you like a behavior at the table, reward it. Somebody drew a
Jay
map. I
has
gave him
never
inspiration
once
for
given
that.
me inspiration.
I have given you.
Correct.
Oh,
You
That
got
is a lie.
tons of inspiration on F list, and I was so annoyed because I was working so hard to get it. See, I'm up to my game now.
The learner is now the master.
Your game
We've
was
come full
always
circle.
as up as possible. The thing about Air is that Air does these like discrete things that are easy to reward, like these really good songs that he would do every so often. Those are easy moments to know, like, oh yes, this I should reward. But like the things that Jerika does is just generally improve a game that she's in. Yeah, it's just like games are just better when Jerika is playing in
3
them,
days
and
later,
it's hard to reward
you're
that.
like,
Yeah,
that was a
exactly.
Jerika moment. I was able to appreciate it at the time.
Yeah, it's like Maximilian's Earthen Grasp was something that I really didn't think about being so awesome until after the game. And then I was like, oh shit, that was really cool, actually.
I have been delighted every time I have played a game with Joy.
It's true.
likewise.
It's a premium experience, and I recommend it highly.
Get a Jerika into your
Leap,
game.
how do you feel
today.
about playing with Jerika?
How do I feel about playing with
God, there's
Jerika?
4 DMs of mine in here.
Jerika, this is buckle in, friends, because after this, you should tweet or message Jerika about your favorite thing of playing with her. But Jerika does come to a game with a very interesting character choice. I want to highlight Glim Junie,
fail, yes.
one of my new favorite small folk creations done by her. And she is out, like Jerika, you've even said this, you're out to influence the world that you're a part of, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Oh man, F-List Banagasa did not waste any time and was like, we're doing my plot. Like, but it wasn't like to the detriment of other people. It wasn't like Banagasa was like, no, we're not doing your plot, we're doing mine. It was like, hey, we got a free time, nobody's doing anything, we're doing my plot. And it was like really good.
If nothing else, I'm the one in the party that will say, let's go this way, let's go that way.
Yeah.
And that was the this way that I had any control over.
Strong, decisive.
Yeah.
Jerika.
Jerika 2020. I'm in.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. Oh, do I get to be the president of D&D?
My good listeners.
Listen, I would vote for you.
And/or
Oh, yeah.
The other one.
Yeah. No Liam or Sam Regal this time. It's
I
it's
stand
Jerika.
upon a platform which grants me advantage on all my attack.
Your president of D&D would like to thank Burnham, BERNUMMM, for our social media faces and brandings. We'd also like to thank Vinsvept for our theme music, Never Stand Alone. Also available in a lyric full track. Exciting. You can find us on at Insight Check Pod on Twitter. We also have a Discord that you can slither into through our Twitter. That the whole starts at the Twitter and goes all the way down. And
Swizzle on in.
that happened. And I'd like to thank you, the listener, for listening to that terrible thing I just said. Answering your cues.
From our collective A's.
This
This.
Insight Check.
I say we use it.
I just
This
think
was
check
this
and you can cut it
insight
up
check.
later. this and check and was and insight. There you go. Something like that.
For sure. So my dungeon crawl this time is going to be
I do have a dungeon crawl, by the way, Jay. Did you want to save yours to the end because it sounds like a segue?
Yeah, save me from myself.
Okay. I leap in the line of fire.
Hey, would I leap?
Listen, man, we're already in a trench coat. Don't step on my brand.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll just go back to the bottom.
I'm the talking one now.
You take the top. You go to the talking now.